Hey everyone, so today we're diving into a topic that, might sound pretty rare to a lot of us, but is actually a living, breathing tradition for literally hundreds of millions of people all over the world. We're talking about consanguineous marriage, marrying a relative. And we're going to unpack the whole thing, why it happens, the social logic behind it, and of course the genetic side of the story.
Okay, let's just start with a number that is kind of staggering, 20%. Think about that. That's 1/5 of everyone on the planet living in communities where marrying a relative isn't just okay, it's often the preferred choice. That is a massive number. So before we go any further, let's make sure we're all on the same page about what we're actually talking about.
All right, so when we talk about consanguinity, what are we actually saying? Well, officially, it's a marriage between two people who are related as second cousins or even closer. So we're not talking about some, distant ancestor from 500 years ago. No, this is about a recent, pretty close, and identifiable family connection.
So, the big question is, where is this actually happening? Because this isn't some dusty old tradition we're reading about in a history book. For so many cultures, this is a core part of the social fabric, like right now, today.
Yeah, there's a really clear pattern when you look at a map. You can almost trace a line, a kind of cultural belt, stretching all the way from North Africa, right through the Middle East, and deep into West and South Asia. And in some places, like Pakistan, the rates are among the highest in the entire world. But it doesn't just stop there. As people move, traditions move with them. So you also see this practice in migrant communities in places like Europe and North America.
And when you look at the actual numbers, the contrast is just, wow, it's huge. In Pakistan, we're talking about rates as high as 73%. In places like Saudi Arabia and Jordan, more than half of all marriages are between relatives. Now, compare that to, say, Western Europe or the US, where it's way, way under 1%. It just goes to show how incredibly different cultural norms can be around the world.
Okay, so this begs a really important question. Why? Why is this so common? Well, it turns out there are some really powerful reasons. From a cultural point of view, marrying within the family is often seen as the social and economic glue, really, that holds everything and everyone together.
If you look at it from a social perspective, the advantages, at least the perceived advantages, are pretty clear. First off, it really strengthens the bonds between different branches of the family. There's way less guesswork, right? The partners know each other, but maybe more importantly, the families already know each other. They share history, they share values. This makes all those pre-wedding negotiations a whole lot smoother. And a lot of studies actually show that these marriages tend to be really stable with lower divorce rates.
And then, of course, there's the economic side of things. And this is a big one. Keeping things in the family makes a ton of financial sense. For one, any dowry payments are often lower, or at least more negotiable. But here's the real kicker. Family wealth stays in the family. Whether it's land or a business or just money, it's not going to an outside family, it's kept right there within the group.
And this quote here really hits the nail on the head. It basically says the commitment to marry a relative is so high because, well, it's seen as the only way to keep that wealth in the family. So for a lot of people, it's not just a preference. It can feel like a real obligation, the best way to make sure the family stays economically secure for generations to come. All right, so we've got all these strong social and economic reasons. It seems to make a lot of sense, right? But there's a pretty big complication to this whole story, and that complication is written directly into our DNA. So now we have to make a hard pivot away from the cultural and into the biological to talk about the genetic gamble that's involved.
So, what's the catch? I mean, if it works so well socially and economically, what's the big deal? Why is this something scientists and doctors are so interested in?
Well, the answer, plain and simple, is in our genes. See, every single one of us carries around little genetic typos or mutations, but most of the time, they don't cause any problems because we have 2 copies of every gene, one from each parent, and usually the healthy copy just overrides the one with the typo. But that all changes when the parents are related.
The sciencey term for this is homozygosity, but let's break that down. Think of your genes like a set of 2 recipe books, one from each parent. Now, if one book has a recipe with a mistake in it, it's usually no big deal because the other book has the correct recipe. But if your parents are related, there's a much higher chance that they both inherited that same mistaken recipe from a grandparent they share. And that means their child could get 2 copies of the bad recipe with no correct one to fix it.
So what does this actually look like in the real world? Well, the statistics are pretty clear. For the general population, the baseline risk of having a child with a congenital malformation is, say, 2 to 3%. But in first cousin unions, that risk
basically doubles. That is a really significant jump.
And it's not just about one thing either. Study after study has linked consanguinity to a whole range of health issues. We're talking about higher rates of these rare recessive diseases we just mentioned, a higher chance of birth defects in general, and even a greater risk of things like infertility, more frequent miscarriages, and sadly, higher rates of infant and newborn deaths. This is just the biological reality of it all.
So here we are with this deep, powerful cultural tradition on one hand, and this very clear, data-driven genetic risk on the other. And that really brings us to the modern day, where science is starting to offer new tools to help families navigate this really complex intersection between culture and biology.
And things are starting to change, slowly but surely. In many places, the practice is on the decline. And the reasons why are probably what you'd guess. We're seeing rising education levels, particularly for women, which gives them more say in their own lives. People are moving to cities, which means they're meeting a much wider variety of potential partners. And, of course, there's just a growing awareness of all the medical risks we've been talking about.
And this is where modern medicine can really make a difference. For couples who still want to follow tradition, there's now a clear path to making a truly informed choice. It usually starts with something called premarital genetic counseling, just to understand the specific risks. From there, they can do screening tests to see if both partners actually carry the same risky gene. With that knowledge, they have options for prenatal diagnosis, and at the end of the day, they are empowered to make the best reproductive decision for their family.
And it's really important to stress that the goal here isn't to judge or get rid of a cultural tradition. Not at all. It's about giving people information. It's about empowerment. It's giving couples the tools to understand their own genetic story so they can navigate that path between honoring their heritage and making the safest possible choices for their future kids.
Which leaves us with this one big, fascinating question to think about. As our world keeps changing, and as this kind of scientific information becomes more and more available, what's going to define the family of the future? Is it going to be the powerful pull of culture and tradition, or the clear, hard facts of science? Or maybe is it going to be some new combination of the two?